The train station was enveloped in a heavy, almost sacred silence, broken only by the rhythmic sound of iron wheels creaking on the tracks in the distance. The sky, covered by dense clouds, seemed to hold its breath along with everyone there. It was as if the world was on hold, waiting for the moment when everything would change. On the platform, among soldiers in uniform and mothers in white scarves, a couple stood still, looking at each other with an intensity that only those who know the urgency of goodbye can understand. He held his military hat tightly. His fingers were red from the cold, but the pressure was more than physical. It was the effort to maintain control, to not give in to emotion. His name was Leonid, young, with firm features and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of many lives, even though he was only 24 years old. In front of him was Anya, his betrothed. Her brown hair was tied up in a simple bun, and a woolen shawl draped her delicate shoulders. His eyes, however, were what stood out most. Large, moist, but firm. She didn't want to cry, not at that moment, not in front of him. They had been there for almost half an hour, standing still, barely touching. All around the world seemed in motion: soldiers boarding, mothers kissing their children, children clinging to their father's legs. But they were frozen, inside their own silent bubble. "Will you write to me?" she asked, her voice hoarse, almost a whisper. He nodded, unable to respond. Immediately, he looked around, as if looking for a way out, a way to stop time. I knew that moment, that exact moment, would never happen again. Not in the same way. Not with that innocence still intact. "Promise," she insisted, with a tremor in her voice. "I promise," he said finally. "Every day, if I can. But if I can't," she placed a finger on his lips. "Don't say I now." His throat tightened. It was as if every word I didn't say at that moment would become a weight inside my chest. And yet, there was so much that needed to be said, and so little time. He wanted to say he was afraid, that he hadn't slept the night before, that he thought about her all the time, that, more than fighting for his homeland, he would fight to return to it. But all of this seemed small compared to the grandeur of the silence that surrounded them. The locomotive whistled, a shrill sound that ripped through the air like an omen. Soldiers began to move towards the carriages. Leonid looked at the train, then back at Anya. Farewell was inevitable. The time had arrived. She stepped forward, standing so close that he could smell the soft lavender scent she always wore. Her eyes were begging for something he hadn't yet given her. A gesture, a certainty, a kiss. But he hesitated. The emotion, the rush, the fear of not being able to leave if he kissed her. All of this stopped his movements. Instead of a kiss, it was a contained hug, too tight, as if trying to glue his soul to hers. Her face, pressed against his chest, and for a brief moment, everything around her disappeared. "I'll be back," he whispered into her hair. "I'll wait," she replied, her voice firm. It wasn't a promise, it was a decision. Then, he walked away. He took a few steps towards the train. It stopped. He looked back. She was still there, with her shawl dancing in the wind and her eyes fixed on him, unblinking. He smiled, with effort. He wanted to go back, run to her, kiss her with all the intensity he had saved for so long, but the train was already moving. She raised one hand, he reciprocated, and so they remained, two distant bodies, connected by an invisible thread made of love, pain, and a kiss that didn't happen. That kiss that wasn't given at that moment would become the center of all the longing. A gesture not experienced, but remembered. A kiss that didn't exist, but that, for that very reason, would become eternal. The silence before the storm held a love that, even without words, already knew everything about goodbyes. Leonid entered the carriage. Anya didn't move. The train left. And, between the steel of the tracks and the blow of the wind, the kiss that was missing was suspended in time, waiting to be written. The locomotive slowly disappeared over the horizon, leaving behind not only smoke and the metallic noise of vibrating rails, but also a trail of silent promises. Anya remained motionless on the platform until the last car was out of sight. His eyes were still fixed on the spot where Leonid's face had disappeared, as if, by keeping his gaze steady, he could stop time from taking what he loved most. She didn't cry, not there. Tears were a luxury she still didn't allow herself. The heart beat fast, squeezed between the pain of separation and the certainty that something had been left behind. Not a letter, not an object, but a kiss. A simple, everyday gesture, but in that context it became a symbol of everything that was not said, of everything that still needed to be experienced. Leonid, in turn, sitting next to the window on the moving train, watched the landscape pass by with a growing emptiness in his chest. The trees paraded like figures. The fields seemed too vast to contain the anguish that was gnawing at him inside. His hand was still shaking slightly, not from the cold, but from the feeling that something essential had escaped him, something that could not be recovered easily. It was as if, by not kissing her, he had left a part of himself with Anya, a part that now hurt, as if it had been ripped away. But there was something in her eyes that he couldn't forget, something that still kept him whole, even in the middle of that touchless goodbye. A look that said, "Come back alive." That said, "Don't get lost." That said, everything that words couldn't do in that season, suffocated by rush. During the journey, Leonid took a small notebook from his inside jacket pocket. It was a simple object, with a dark cover and yellowed pages. There he would begin to write everything he couldn't say, and everything he wanted her to know, if fate were cruel to her. On the first page, he hesitated. The tip of the pencil touched the paper, but no words seemed enough. How can we capture in sentences what a look sealed with such force? How to translate the absence of a kiss into something that could be saved, relived, felt? He took a deep breath and just wrote, "Anya, if I could go back, I would have kissed you." But there was something more. Urgent, promising with my eyes that I would come back. That was my way of saying I love you. On the other side, days later, Anya sat alone in her room, with her shawl still wrapped around her shoulders. The silence of the house was an echo of the station, a space where time seemed to move strangely, where each second dragged on like an eternity. She got up and went to the small shelf where there was a wooden box. Inside it, he placed a handkerchief, a faded photograph of Leonid, and a blank envelope. The letter hadn't arrived yet, but she knew it would. That night, lying in bed with her hands clasped over her belly, Anya closed her eyes and remembered the look in his eyes. There was something about the way he looked at her before entering the carriage. It wasn't just dismissal, it was a delivery. It was as if he had left her a mission, to keep hope alive until he returned. She didn't know that that look would become her anchor in the months to come. She didn't know that, when everything fell apart, it would be that moment, that exchange of intense silences, that would keep her standing. But in that moment, she felt it. She felt that Leonid had given her something more powerful than words or promises. He had entrusted her with the weight of their reunion, and she would not fail. Meanwhile, the war began to show its cruel face. Leonid and his companions crossed cold, muddy territories, racked by fear and tension. But he carried Anya's gaze with him like armor. I wrote whenever I could, short letters, others long, all starting with the same impulse, to recreate, in words, what he was unable to experience that day. Each letter was a piece of that kiss denied, a reconstruction, a promise that was renewed with each sentence. As if, by writing, he was guaranteeing that there was still time, that the kiss could still happen. The promise was made, not on paper, but in the reflection of the exchanged glance. It was there that the purest fidelity lived, the most sincere expectation, a pact between two worlds, separated by battles, but united by a memory that resisted everything. The moment when eyes spoke louder than lips, and even without having touched, even without having kissed, something had been sealed there, something stronger than time, more resistant than distance, more lasting than war, something called love. The field where Leonid now lived was everything that love was not: cold, hard, unpredictable. No letter had yet been sent, not because of a lack of desire, but because, every time I sat down to write, the silence that remained from the last hug seemed louder than any words. It was as if, by not kissing Anya, he had condemned them both to a void that no letter seemed capable of filling. In the makeshift accommodation, lit by a kerosene lamp, he stared at the notebook. It was the same as on the trip, but now its edges were wrinkled and the cover was stained with dried clay. The fingers hesitated, as if each attempt to write was a delicate surgery on the heart itself. He thought about her with almost unhealthy frequency. There wasn't a night when Anya's face didn't appear in his mind, enveloped in that soft light of the season, looking at him as if asking, without words, not to be forgotten. And he didn't forget. On the contrary, it was in everything, in the muffled sound of shots in the distance, in the rigidity of the snow that covered the fields, in the void between military orders. That night, however, he knew he needed to write, not for him, but for her, because maybe she was waiting. Perhaps, at that same time, she was sitting on her bed, embracing her own silence, searching through her memories for a little of what was left of him. He took a deep breath. He picked up the pencil and began. Eyes, I still don't know why I didn't kiss you. Everything in me wanted it, but there was something inside me, a fear, perhaps, that by kissing you, I wouldn't be able to leave, and I needed to leave. I needed it, because it was right, but nothing in me wanted to go. It stopped. He looked at the sheet and felt his throat burn. How could simple words, so small, hurt so much? The letter was not an explanation. It was an attempt, a request for forgiveness for what cannot always be controlled. There was an urgent desire in Leonid to touch Anya with words, since he couldn't do it with his lips. He continued, now, in the midst of all this, I only think about what I left behind. I'm not talking about the city, the peace, the warm bed. I'm talking about you. I'm talking about the two of us. Everything we had, and that, out of fear, I let slip through my fingers. I looked at you, I hugged you, but I didn't say the main thing. I didn't say that I love you, like someone who loves the last chance to be happy, like someone who loves knowing that they might not have another opportunity. And yet, I remained silent. The words became faster, as if, once the floodgates of memory were opened, everything came pouring out with force. The pain he felt didn't come from the war. It came from the absent kiss, from the touch not given, of the incomplete farewell. If I had 5 more seconds, if the train had been late, if I had been braver. Leonid closed his eyes and saw her. Anya, the eyes steady, face tilted up, waiting, and he, foolish, wavering, his chest constricted with guilt. War took many things from a man, his youth, his sleep, his security. But the worst of all was this, the certainty that time doesn't come back. That's why, in that letter, he undressed. It was no longer about writing to comfort. It was writing so that she would know what was alive inside him, even in the midst of death. It was his way of saying that although the war stole his days, it would not steal his truth. You deserve to know that I love you with the strength of someone who faces the impossible every day. That the kiss I didn't give you accompanies me. That it burns on my lips. That I close my eyes every night and kiss you in silence. This kiss, Anya, will be yours, even if I don't come back. Even if I don't live to deliver it, it's already yours. And it is written here, where no one can erase it. He folded the sheet. He signed with shaking hands. He kept it in the envelope. On the other side of the world, Anya didn't know yet, but that letter was on its way. And, with it, would not just come the confession of love, but the weight of the words that weren't said when it was possible. Sincere repentance, and the kiss that wasn't born on the lips, but that would still come. The written kiss. The night was cold, silent, as if even the war had stopped to breathe. The makeshift camp slept, but Leonid remained awake. The exhausted body desired rest, but the restless mind demanded one more letter. It wasn't about discipline, not out of habit. It was necessity, an urgency that gnawed at him from the inside, to rescue, through writing, what reality had denied him. The kiss, he didn't know if that would be his last letter. The war was too unpredictable to promise returns, but he knew there was still something that needed to be written, something that didn't fit into instructions or reports from the front. It was intimate, it was sacred, it was the kiss he didn't give. He took the notebook, now with several pages already filled out. On a new sheet of paper, he began to write as if he were in front of Anya, as if she were there, sitting in front of him, waiting. Like at the station. I closed my eyes and tried to go back to the moment we said goodbye. The station, the sound of the train, the cold wind cutting into our faces. Everything is still vivid here. But what hurts most is remembering what I didn't do. From the kiss that was trapped between my fears and the rush of departure. That kiss, my love, has not disappeared. He is here, and this letter is where he will live. The words flowed with a different rhythm that night. There was no rush. There was no fear, just true. I closed my eyes many times since that day, and every time I kissed you. Slowly, carefully, with longing. I touched your face with hands that now hold a weapon, but that before only knew how to caress. I kissed your forehead, your eyes, your mouth. It was in that kiss, Anya, that I gave you what I didn't have the courage to say, that you are the peace I'm looking for in the middle of war. Leonid stopped. The distant sound of a pop echoed across the hills. but he didn't move. There, in that role, he was delivering not just a gesture, but a piece of his soul. I write this kiss because I'm afraid I won't be able to give it in person. And if, for some reason, I don't come back, I want you to know that it's yours. It always was. This is our kiss, Anya, not those who rush in, afraid of the train leaving, but the kiss that you give with your whole heart, with your eyes closed, with the certainty that there is enough love to cross time. In the letter, he described that imagined moment in detail. He said how he would have held her face with both hands, how he would have gently tilted her head, how he would have left her eyes last, because he knew it would be too difficult to say goodbye to them. And then, finally, he would have pressed his lips to hers, not as a farewell, but as a promise, an early reunion. And if fate is cruel to me, my Anya, may at least this written kiss reach you. May he find you on a calm day. May you be by the window, perhaps with a ray of sunlight touching your face. And may, as you read these words, feel the tenderness that I saved for you. Because love is not just what we experience, it's also what we write, what we feel, what we leave between the lines of time. Leonid's hands were shaking, but not from the cold. It was emotion. It was the weight of love that he carried, and that, there, flowed onto the paper like balm and confession. He folded the letter carefully, as if cradling a treasure. He placed it in an envelope, sealing it with the initials of her name. On the back, he wrote a simple sentence, "So that you never forget, our kiss lives here." He knew there was no way to guarantee that letter would arrive. The borders were fragile. Messengers risked their lives, and the war devoured even feelings. But there was a silent faith in Leonid that, even if the world ended, that letter would have the strength to find its way. On the other side of the world, Anya was still waiting. I spent my days in stitches and silence. Previous letters were kept carefully inside a wooden box. She read them and reread them, but she knew there was still something missing. That kiss was missing, that gesture, and soon, without knowing it, she would have in her hands what he couldn't give in person, a kiss, written in a letter. If up until now you have felt your heart sink with every word written by Leonid, then you are part of those who still believe that true love resists time, distance, and even war. So, if this story touched you in some way, give back to this moment with a simple gesture. Leave your like right now and subscribe to the channel. This shows that there are still people who value real, deep, and unforgettable stories like this one. And now, take a deep breath, because in the next chapter, you will find out how Anya reacted when she received the letter that contained the kiss that never happened. A reading that transforms memory into presence and words into reunion. Get ready. What comes next will shake you even more. The letter arrived on a cloudy day, the kind where the wind passes through the cracks in the window as if carrying messages from the past. Anya was in the kitchen, carefully folding freshly ironed dish towels, when she heard a knock on the door. It was the postman, the same as always, with tired eyes but a slight smile on his lips. He just handed over the envelope and nodded. There were no words. It wasn't necessary. Upon seeing the sender, Anya's heart skipped a beat. Her hands started to shake before she even opened the envelope. It was as if the energy of that letter was different, as if there was something there other than longing. There was something deep, urgent, vital. She walked to her room, sat down in the armchair next to the window, the same place where she read all of Leonid's letters, and, with the care of someone touching a relic, broke the seal. The paper was cold to the touch, but soon his hands warmed it. The text was long, and, in the first few lines, Anya's eyes filled with tears. He had written about the kiss that didn't happen. She read each word as if it were a breath coming straight from his chest. It was as if he was there, next to you, whispering each sentence. The descriptions were so vivid, so sensitive, that Anya closed her eyes for a moment and allowed herself to feel. And suddenly, he was there, Leonid, in front of her, eyes steady, hands shaking, heart exposed. The kiss, which until then only existed in the memory of a lost opportunity, now took shape, rhythm. It was in the words, interlined in the pauses, hidden in the silences between one sentence and another. And it was as real as if it had happened. I've closed my eyes many times since that day, and every time I kissed you, those words echoed like music, as if, finally, there was an answer to what she had felt since the moment he left. The absence of that kiss had been a burden. a subtle but constant weight, something that made her wonder, on long nights, if he missed it too. Now she knew. I felt, and a lot. She reread the letter 3 times in a row. Each reading brought a new detail, a different emotion. The third time, his fingers rested on the phrase, written on the back of the envelope, "So that you never forget, our kiss lives here." Anya smiled through her tears. It was a brief, shy smile, like the one she gave when he made her laugh with something silly. That was the kind of letter that wasn't kept in just one box. It was meant to be read all the time, always felt, always live. She got up, went to the mirror, and looked at her own reflection. For the first time in weeks, his eyes felt lit, alive. There was more there than longing. There was presence. His presence, even if distant. The certainty that their love was not suspended in time. It was happening, page by page, word for word. That night, before going to sleep, Anya wrote a reply. He didn't use many words, just enough to let him know the letter had arrived, that the kiss had been received, that, even written, it was felt with the intensity of a touch. "Leonid, I read your letter like someone living a dream. The kiss you wrote reached me as if it had crossed time, and believe me, I also closed my eyes and kiss you. Come back to me, so that this time, this kiss doesn't stay on paper." He folded the sheet gently and placed it in a new envelope. Tomorrow, she would send it, but for now, he left it on the table, next to a flower picked from the garden, a small tribute to the love that, despite being absent, grew. Anya didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing. What was written between those lines wasn't just desire, it was a promise. It was true, and more than anything, it was memory. Because there are kisses that are stolen in the dark, there are kisses that are lost in the rush, and there are kisses that, even though never given, remain alive, because they were written with enough love to resist time, distance, and even oblivion. The days following that letter were different for Anya. She woke up earlier, as if her body was expecting news before her mind even remembered that there was still war. "I went to the mailbox every day, even though I knew the letters didn't follow a calendar. But what kept her going was simple: hope." The reply he had sent to Leonid contained few words, but they were all true. She didn't need to write much. It was enough for him to know that the kiss had been felt, that she carried it in her chest like a reliquary. Still, the wait for a return has become an unbearable constant. The time between one letter and another seemed like an eternity. Days passed, then weeks, and nothing. Anxiety turned into silence, silence in fear, and fear in an anguish that is difficult to bear. Anya began to imagine 1,000 scenarios. What if he had been transferred? What if you were injured? What if I hadn't received your response? What if, even worse, he had been defeated by war? Fear was a slow poison. She tried to distract herself with household chores, harvesting, reading old books, but nothing worked completely. There was a void in his routine, the absence of Leonid's words. However, even without answers, she continued writing. Letters that might never be sent, or that they might never be read. But writing was the only way to continue feeling connected to him. It was the invisible thread between two worlds, hers, calm and silent, and his, violent and uncertain. In each letter, she deposited fragments of her memory. The day they met, the first touch of hands, the first time he spoke to her about the war, and of course, the train station, the almost kiss, and the promise made with just his eyes. Writing was resisting, and it was on the 36th day without news that, finally, a new letter arrived. The envelope was torn on the side, stained with dirt, but it was unmistakably Leonid's. Anya unfolded the paper with shaking hands. His handwriting was a little shakier, as if written in a hurry or with injured hands, but the words still carried the same heat. He said that he had been transferred, that the winter had been cruel, that he had lost friends, but that, even in the midst of the chaos, he never stopped thinking about her. And then, a sentence made her close her eyes. "I received your letter. I read it like someone returning home. I knew right there that I'm not just fighting for survival, I'm fighting to kiss you again." Leonid's new letter did not mention dates or returns, but it was full of emotion. An emotion that seemed, somehow, premonitory. There was a different urgency about her, a farewell tone, albeit subtle, as if he knew he might not be able to write again. "If this is my last letter, Anya, may it be an altar to our love." Anya held her breath as she read that sentence. His chest tightened. The next words seemed to weigh more than the paper could hold. He described a particularly difficult night at the front. He said attacks were intensifying, that the soldiers were tired, sick, dirty. But despite everything, he clung to the memory of the kiss he didn't give. Last night, as the world exploded around me, I closed my eyes and kissed you. Again, as if the end was near, and all I wanted to keep was this. It was as if he was preparing Anya for something. As if leaving between the lines the message of someone who loves so much that they don't want to be forgotten. But you also don't want to cause pain. At the end of the letter, a detail, something that made her sob. Inside this envelope, you will find a petal. It is from the only flower I could find in this barren field. Keep it. She saw my smile as I wrote this letter. She knows that even if I fall, what we had does not die. Anya put her hand over her mouth. At the bottom of the envelope, there was indeed a dried petal. Small, faded in color, fragile, but with the strength of a symbol. She held it to her chest and cried. For the first time, he let the crying come without restriction. The cry that I had kept since the station. It hasn't happened since the kiss. He folded the letter carefully. He placed it inside the box where there were already others. But this wasn't just another one. It was different. It tasted like goodbye. And that day, at dusk, Anya sat at the window for a long time. The sun colored the sky orange and gold. In his hand, the petal rested, as if sleeping. She didn't know it yet, but that had really been the last letter. The last, and the most unforgettable. It was a morning like any other, but there was a strange feeling in the air. The sky was too clear, the silence on the street was uncomfortable, and even the birds seemed to sing in lower tones. Anya woke up early, as she always did since the letters started arriving. Her first action was to look at the table where she kept the box with Leonid's latest correspondence, a kind of silent ritual that made her feel close to him. But that day, something would be different. Around 10 in the morning, he heard knocking on the door. 2 short, dry knocks that didn't come with the postman's usual rhythm or with the lightness of a visitor. They were tough, officers, and deep in her heart, she knew. When he opened the door, he saw 2 men in uniform. One of them held a small envelope, sealed with dark wax. The other just looked into her eyes, with a blank expression, the same one you see on faces that repeat tragedies so many times that they no longer know how to carry other people's pain. Anya didn't need them to talk. His legs gave way. The hand slipped on the doorknob. On instinct, she leaned against the doorframe, trying to maintain her posture as the entire world collapsed around her. "Miss Anya Vasilieva?" asked the officer. She nodded. The eyes, glassy, already flooded with tears. "We received confirmation. Leonid Dmitriev was considered killed in action. Estimated date, for days." After the last letter sent, the envelope they handed him seemed to weigh tons. She held it with trembling fingers. Inside, just an official note, written in an impersonal, cold, merciless way. A date, a location, no body, no certainty. But that was enough. "Leonid. You're Leonid." She closed the door without saying a word. He walked through the house like someone walking through rubble. Every corner, every object, now seemed charged with mourning. The chair where he read his letters, the wooden box, with the souvenirs, the shawl she wore on the day of her farewell. Everything was now shadow. She fell to her knees on the bedroom floor and finally cried. A cry that had no sound, only despair. A cry that came from a place that no letter, no memory, no written kiss could reach. It was the cry of emptiness. Never again. Hours passed, maybe days. She couldn't tell. It just existed within that pain. And for a long time, I couldn't even open the old letters. It was as if their love burned through hers, if remembering made it more real, and, at the same time, more lost. But one silent dawn, unable to sleep, she lit a candle and went to the box. He knelt before her as if praying, and, with the delicacy of someone who touches what is sacred, he removed the last letter, the one that talked about the kiss, the one that came with the petal. She read it out loud, and, between sobs, he felt something unexpected, peace. Because there, in that letter, Leonid already knew. Somehow, he had felt it, and, instead of leaving her with the fear of death, he had left her a gift, an eternal kiss, a memory written to last beyond the end. Anya held the petal between her fingers, brought it to her lips, and, as if touching his soul, said in a low voice, "I felt it, Leonid." I felt your kiss, and he lives here, in me." And then, in that instant, she knew something inside her wouldn't die. That despite the news that had broken his world into pieces, love survived, not as an illusion, but as truth, because what they experienced did not depend on time, presence, or even life. It depended only on what survives the silence, the right words, written at the right time, and a kiss that, even though never given, would never be forgotten. From the day she received the news, Anya started walking to the old train station every afternoon. It was a silent route, lined with trees that seemed to have aged with time. Each step on that path was a journey through one's own pain, but also a way of keeping alive what was left, memory. She sat on the same wooden bench where she had been with Leonid, that morning of their farewell. The place was already worn out, the varnish was peeling off, but it still preserved the aura of that moment. The same wind was blowing, the same grey sky, the same platform that saw so many loves leave without knowing if they would return. It was there that she closed her eyes and revived, with the senses, with the heart, with the soul. The train arriving, Leonid's steps, the look they exchanged, the tight hug, the hesitation, the absence of the kiss. But now, everything was different. In Anya's memory, the kiss happened, not as something invented, but as something real. Real because she felt it, because I had read it with my heart, because even though I had never touched his lips at that moment, I felt as if I had touched them 1,000 times since then. The kiss was alive, not in the past, but there, gift, pulsing inside her. She felt it when she ran her fingers over the letter, when the wind touched his face with the same softness as the words he had written. She felt the afternoon sun kissing her skin, warm and delicate. He felt it when he placed the petal, now kept inside a small glass reliquary, on his chest and let time silence him. And, over the years, Anya understood something that no one had ever taught her, that some kisses, when not given, become eternal. That the absence of a gesture, when sustained by true love, gains an almost sacred strength. She never stopped missing him. He never stopped dreaming of what could have been, but he also never allowed pain to cancel out love. On the contrary, it made him a beacon in the midst of darkness. Some said it was crazy reliving a kiss that never happened, but Anya knew the truth. That kiss had existed, not on the lips, but in the soul, and that was more than enough to keep her alive. In the years that followed, he continued to visit the station. The bench grew old. With her, his hair turned white, his gait became slower, but the eyes kept the same shine, because Leonid still lived inside them. The instant was still frozen in time. The kiss still lived. And, even when she could no longer walk to the station alone, she asked to be taken. She sat on the same bench, and, even without speaking, those who passed by knew. There, in that silent woman, lived a story that time had not erased. She used to carry the kiss letter with her. He read in a low voice. Sometimes I didn't even need to read it. He knew every word by heart, but he liked the sound of those sentences in the air, as if he could still hear them from wherever he was. As if, by saying them, he created a bridge between now and then. This is our kiss, Anya. Not the kind you give in a hurry, afraid of the train leaving, but the kiss you give with your whole heart, with your eyes closed, with the certainty that there is enough love to cross time. And that's what she did, day after day. She crossed time with love. She kept alive the memory of a kiss that only lived in words, but which, for her, had been the most real of all. She didn't need photographs, relics, or witnesses. All he had to do was sit there and close his eyes. And then he came. Leonid, young, smiling, approaching. The breeze of departure on your face, the promise in the eyes, and the kiss. I always kiss him, and that was why, for Anya, he was never completely gone. Because the kiss that lived in memory would never die. Time passed. Anya continued to live, but not like before. Not as someone who waits for something that can still come, but as someone who keeps something that can never be taken away. There was no other love, no other man. There was only memory, and with it, enough to get through the years. The days became months, the months, years, and the years, decades. Anya grew old in a small house on the edge of town, surrounded by wildflowers and black and white photographs. Neighbors knew her as the station lady. Many didn't know her story in full, but everyone felt that there was something about her that stood the test of time. a kind of beauty that didn't depend on youth, but on the depth of someone who truly loved. She spoke little. She was serene, discreet, observant, but there was a quiet strength in the way he lived, a strength built not on what he possessed, but on what he felt. She carried no hard feelings. There was no bitterness. There was just a deep respect for life, and the silence it learned to inhabit. Silence was his companion, a type of shelter where memories are kept without them becoming noise. She didn't talk about Leonid often, not because she had forgotten him, but because she had transformed the memory of him into something intimate, sacred, something that didn't need to be explained, just felt. He still kept the box with the letters, the yellowed paper, the firm lines of Leonid's handwriting, the dry tool. Everything was there, as it had been from the beginning, but now she didn't read often, not because it hurt, but because I already knew everything by heart. Those words lived in her, no longer on paper. The letters had become part of his soul. On some birthdays, she allowed herself a reading. He sat at the table, lit a candle, placed the letter in front of him, and read it in a low voice. He did this not as someone who relives pain, but as someone who honors the eternity of a feeling. Once, a neighborhood child innocently asked, "Lady Anya, why didn't you ever get married?" She smiled, looked at the garden where the leaves were slowly falling, and replied, "Simply, because my love lives in another time, and I still visit him every day." No one fully understood, but that sentence remained in the air, like a poem that echoes even when it is not understood. Anya learned to live with absence as if it were presence. I had little rituals. I put fresh flowers on the table on the days I dreamed about Leonid. He sat by the window, whenever he heard the distant whistle of a train, and sometimes, without realizing it, she whispered fragments of the last letter to herself. "Even if I don't live to give it to you, this kiss is already yours." Decades passed, and with them, many left. Friends, family, neighbors. The war, which one day took Leonid, became a chapter in books, a faded photograph in the archives of time. But for her, it never stopped being personal. It never stopped being real. One of those late winters, when she no longer left the house so often, Anya sat in the armchair in the living room and looked at the old clock on the wall. Time seemed slower. His body no longer responded as before, but his mind remained lucid, the memory intact, the kiss still alive. She then did something she hadn't done in a long time. She wrote a letter, but this time not to send. She wrote to herself, or maybe for him, or for time, it didn't matter. He wrote, "Leonid, I still remember the station, from the sound of the train, from the butterflies in your stomach, but most of all, I remember the kiss we didn't share. He accompanied me throughout my life, and it was enough. You gave me what many don't receive, even with 1,000 kisses, the certainty of a love that needs nothing else to be complete." He folded the letter delicately. He placed it inside the box with the others. He closed his eyes, and for a few moments, on that silent afternoon, she felt his presence stronger than ever, as if Leonid was there, kneeling before her, whispering, "I'm back, and I still kiss you." The silence of that moment was not empty, it was fullness. Decades had passed since the war. The world was different. The streets were busier, the trains were quieter, the young people were busier. But amid the speed of new times, some stories simply refused to disappear. It was a cold weekend when Mikhail, a young historian, passionate about personal accounts of World War II, decided to visit an antiques fair in a distant small town. She had grown up listening to her grandmother talk about lost love letters and forgotten records, and now she spent her days looking for objects that told stories that official books didn't capture. That morning, something caught his attention. A small, weathered wooden box with a faded ribbon around it. It was among piles of photographs, medals, uniform buttons. The seller, a man with a tired expression, simply said it was among the belongings of a house that will be demolished. Nobody came to get it. Old sentimental stuff. "You like that stuff, don't you?" Mikhail didn't respond, just opened the lid. Inside, neatly stacked, were dozens of letters, all addressed to a woman named Anya Vasilieva, and all signed by Leonid Dmitriev. The paper was yellowed, but still readable, and among the letters, a smaller envelope, sealed with old wax, and the following phrase written on the back, "So that you never forget, our kiss lives here." Mikhail's heart skipped a beat. There, before his eyes, were not just letters. There was a story, one that spoke of love in the midst of chaos, of words that survive gunpowder, of feelings that defy absence. It was the kind of discovery that wasn't made every day. He bought the box, silently thanked her, and that same night spent hours reading every word. It was as if Leonid was there, whispering his emotions from beyond. It's as if Anya, silently, was waiting still for someone who could hear her part of the story. Mikhail couldn't sleep. The next day, he started researching Anya Vatsilieva. There weren't many references, but he found a record at a local hospital, a 97-year-old woman, resident of a nursing home. The name was the same, and something in his heart said it was her. Armed with the letters, Mikhail traveled to the location. The atmosphere was calm, scented with freshly watered flowers. When asking about Mrs. Anya, the nurse smiled tenderly. "Ah, yes, our guardian of time. She says little, but has eyes that see far." Away, Anya was sitting by the window, covered in an antique shawl, with her white hair neatly tied back. The eyes, although aged, still carried a rare light. When she saw Mikhail approaching with the wooden box, something in her woke up. I didn't say anything, just watched. And the moment he opened the lid and revealed the cards, his eyes watered. She put her hand over her mouth. He touched one of the cards delicately, as if finding a part of his own body. Silence settled for long seconds, until she said, in a low voice, "You found my time." Mikhail sat in front of him. He took out one of the letters, the one with the kiss, and began to read. Leonid's words came to life in the air, and Anya, motionless, let the tears run down her wrinkled face, without bothering to hide them. At the end of the reading, Anya placed her hand on her chest. He took a deep breath. Then he whispered, "He always said he would come back, and now he returned because of his words." The excitement in the room was almost palpable. Mikhail couldn't explain why he was there, nor why that story had found him. But I knew I had a role, to be a bridge, be a witness, being the one who, even without having experienced love, would now help him to be remembered. Anya closed her eyes for a moment, and, with a slight smile, he said, "The kiss he wrote. I felt it all these years, but hearing it again, hearing it now, was like welcoming it again. And on that day, something sacred happened. The past and the present, touched. A story that seemed to have been buried in rubble has been revived, not just through the letters, but through the gesture of a stranger who understood that love, when true, needs to be told." And Anya, already at the end of her walk, felt that she was finally ready, because now it wasn't just her who carried that kiss. Someone else knew him, someone else would feel it, someone else would tell your story. And so, love continued, by the hands of someone who never lived it, but understood it. In the days that followed, Mikhail began to visit Anya frequently. He was not just a historian, but a young man with a sensitive soul, capable of understanding that some stories were not meant to remain in books, but rather in the eyes of those who lived them. And Anya, with her low voice and restrained gestures, began to see him as more than just a curious person. I saw a messenger, a guardian. The afternoons were always the same. Hot tea, soft light coming in through the window, and letters spread out on the wooden table in the nursing home room. Anya played them reverently. Mikhail read, always with a pause, always with emotion. And then, on a clear Sunday, he suggested something different. "Miss Anya, can I read them all out loud, from beginning to end?" She hesitated for a second. Her eyes welled up, but she nodded. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath and said, "I want to hear everything," as if it were the first time. Mikhail started with the first letter. The lyrics were firm, yet hopeful. He read slowly, articulating each word carefully, as if he were giving voice to Leonid, bringing him back into the room, present among them. Anya listened with her head slightly tilted, eyes closed, as if reconstituting the past inside her chest. Each sentence read seemed to open a door, from the train station, from the house where she waited, from the bench where he wrote under the flickering lights of war. When Mikhail got to the kiss letter, the one written urgently, like a camouflaged farewell declaration, his voice broke for a second. But she returned, now firmer, more involved. Each word filled the environment with a different silence, a dense silence, filled with something that seemed sacred. "I closed my eyes and kissed you again, as if the end was near, and all I wanted to keep was this." Upon hearing this part, Anya opened her eyes, slowly, and he looked at the horizon, beyond the window. Outside, the world continued as normal, But for her, everything was suspended in time. Reading had reopened a wound, but it had also healed it. It was a reunion between voice and heart. She reached out her hand and touched Mikhail's. "Thank you for giving this back to me," she said, almost in a whisper. "I read with my eyes, but today I listened with my soul." Mikhail remained silent. I understood that there was nothing to say. Some emotions are complete in themselves. And then Anya did something unexpected. He asked for paper and a pen. With shaking hands, he wrote a few lines. The line was faint but determined. "Leonid, today I heard your voice again. And, for a moment, I was that girl at the station again. Thank you for loving me, even when the war tried to silence us." Our kiss was read aloud, and now he is eternal. He folded the paper carefully. He placed it next to the other letters and said, "Now it is complete." That night, Anya slept early, and he slept peacefully, a type of peace that only reaches those who have intensely experienced what cannot be touched, but which has been felt. A kind of peace that comes when you realize that love doesn't die, it changes form. Sometimes it turns into longing, sometimes memory, sometimes voice. Mikhail returned home carrying more than a set of old letters. He carried with him a living history, a love that spanned decades, survived absence, and found its redemption in reading. And from then on, whenever he talked about war, he didn't just talk about battles or strategies. It talked about Leonid and Anya, of the kiss that wasn't given, but that, when read out loud, became more real than any gesture, because there are words that are born to be heard. And when they're spoken truthfully, they don't just resonate, they touch. They come back to life. Time, that invisible Lord who transforms everything, seemed to have bowed before the story of Leonid and Anya, because, despite the past decades, the war, the losses, the words swallowed by fear and destiny, the kiss that never happened, never died. Anya left on a quiet spring morning, aged 98. The sun was gently shining through the window. The flowers in the garden were in full bloom, and a light breeze was swaying the white curtain. She slept, and in her face there was peace, a serene expression, like someone who had finally found themselves. Next to him, on the table, lay the letters, and in her lap, with her hands clasped, she held the last one that Mikhail had read aloud, the kiss. The envelope was wrinkled with age, but the wax seal still held. On the back, the words that she carried as a compass her entire life. "So that you never forget, our kiss lives here." The nursing home staff, respectful, did not move anything. When Mikhail arrived, he was greeted with silence. Seeing Anya there, still with the letters in her hands, I knew that she had left exactly as she wanted, with love still alive in her chest, with Leonid still present in the memory, with the kiss still pulsing in some part of the soul. He collected the letters carefully. He took them with him, not to lock them away in some historical archive, but to share them with the world. I felt that love didn't just belong to the past, it needed to echo in the present. I needed to touch other hearts, showing that, even in the darkest times, it is possible to love deeply, with dedication, with truth. And that's how Mikhail wrote a book. It wasn't just a collection of letters, it was a sensitive reconstruction of Anya and Leonid's story. He narrated each moment, the farewell at the station, the kiss not given, the written love, the long wait, the silence, the reunion through reading. Each chapter carried the weight and beauty of a love that knew how to resist absence. The title of the book, The Last Kiss, and in the dedication, a simple sentence, "For all those who still believe that true love does not depend on time, nor on touch, but on the soul." The book moved readers across the country. People who had never met Anya or Leonid found themselves crying over their letters. Young people rediscovered their faith in love. Elderly people revived forgotten memories. Couples began to value simple gestures more, and many began to write letters of love, of farewell, of reconciliation, because they realized that there is a strength in written words that time cannot erase. Anya and Leonid became symbols, not a tragic story, but an eternal story, because the kiss that remained on paper was now in the hearts of thousands of people. And in an exhibition organized years later, at the station where it all began, Mikhail placed the original kiss letter in a window. Next to it, a photograph of a young Anya with the shawl around her shoulders, and a phrase engraved on the glass: "Some kisses last a moment, others a lifetime." Visitors from all over came to see. Some were crying, Others smiled silently, but everyone left with something different in their chest. The feeling that love, when true, never ends. Because there are gestures that don't need to happen to become real. There are promises that resist, even without a voice. And there are kisses like Leonid and Anya that, even though never given, become eternal. Not because they were lived, but because they were written with the soul. And so, in the rhythm of the letters, in the silence of the windows, in the whisper of the old pages, the last kiss remained alive. Not on lips that touched, but in words that crossed time. And, like everything that is true, he never died. He just waited to be remembered. If this story touched your heart like it touched ours, don't leave without giving back. Leave your like and subscribe to the channel. This helps us to continue bringing stories that deserve to be remembered. And if you believe that true love resists even the silence of goodbye, share this video with someone who also needs to feel this. In the comments write, "That kiss never died. Let's together keep alive the memory of this love that crossed time."